Good morning, Jeff Light here with our daily look behind the news from the Union-Tribune newsroom. This morning we're speaking with environmental reporter Joshua Emerson Smith.
Hey.
Joshua, you and I have talked a couple times in the past about nuclear energy, its role in the campaign against carbon emissions.
Yeah, climate change.
And it's, where it fits inside the environmental movement. But today you've got a story that you're working on about where it fits inside the energy profile of the world and of America. What do you have?
Yeah, it's kind of also like within the environmental movement still, right? Because we're talking about nuclear power, which provides 20% of all the energy last year. And
In the U.S.
In the U.S., all the energy in the U.S. And when you look at renewables, that provides about 17% of all the energy in the U.S. So if nuclear power were to go away, you'd be like losing half of your low carbon profile right there, right? So there's all these people who are now saying we care deeply about climate change, and so we also care deeply about nuclear power sticking around for decades to come. However, given the current state of things and how expensive it is, especially compared to natural gas, right, which has come on the scene as this super low, cheap fuel, a la fracking, we're seeing nuclear power plants basically being phased out left or right, and they're saying if we don't revolutionize nuclear power within the next decade, we could lose one of our lowest carbon sources of energy.
Yeah, so an interesting alignment here now between the environmental movement and the Trump administration, who have the same talking points.
Right.
So what can be done?
Right. So right now we have,
like in California, there are no nuclear power plants coming online. They're all being retired, right?
Right. And so the people who are advocating for nuclear power, saying it's a clean source of energy, we need to embrace it, say, let's extend the life of these large light water reactors, basically the equivalent of like the space shuttles of the 1980s, right? And like as they head toward obsolescence, let's get our act together as quickly as possible and develop the next generation of these nuclear facilities, which are going to probably be smaller. The safety systems are going to be more passive rather than active, apparently, so that they will need less people basically manning it. What I keep hearing is that automation is how we're going to bring the cost down on these nuclear plants, the new ones. So they're going to be smaller, so cheaper to get going, right? So you don't have to make these gigantic investments to get them off the ground. And then also these technological advances, which were basically like startups are like scrambling to figure out. And the interesting thing is a lot of young kids are getting into this now. We have more kids getting nuclear engineering degrees than at any time since the early 1980s. And so I called up some of these nuclear engineering professors, right? We're basically in Berkeley, that's in California, where we have the most nuclear engineering. And they said, these kids, they want to save the world, right? Like, where else are you going to like get into something where you can tell your grandkids, hey, I saved the world, right? Like I saved it from climate change.
Super interesting. Yeah, no, this is San Onofre. This technology is pretty dated, right? I mean, this plant ran into trouble with an update, but basically the platform is something that was designed like in the 80s and the 90s, right?
And right in San Luis Obispo, Diablo Canyon, right, getting phased out by SDG&E because it just isn't cost effective, right? So like no more nuclear power in California, in the next couple of years, and same thing happening all over the country. It's basically a race against time for these advocates of nuclear power to come up with the next generation of technology.
Boy, super interesting. I'm really looking forward to reading that. If you have the answer to the future of nuclear power, please contact Joshua. Have a great 4th of July. We'll see you back here after the holiday.